culture were invited.
Okay, thanks.
And they did confirm attendance, so we will give them a couple of minutes. Not yet, no?
Sorry, on mute, you can be, would be so nice, but I'm just gonna knock off that volume.
Objections, can I get a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved. Second.
There has been a motion to adopt today's agenda. It has been seconded. Any discussion on that motion, members?
Ready.
Okay, those in favor of adopting today's agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it, and today's agenda has been adopted. Okay, before moving on to opening statements, I'd like to introduce our members. Good morning. My name is Sheila Jack Babalsa. I'm a representative from Precinct 4, and I chair the Natural Resources Committee. On your Natural Resources Committee, we do have Vice Chairwoman Denita Yangtamai from Precinct 3. We have Rep. Patrick Nicholas from Tinian. We have Rep. Richard Lizama from Precinct 5. And we have Representative Angel Demapan from Precinct 1. I will now recognize the chair for JGO.
Good morning. My name is Sabina Babalta, and I chair the Judiciary and Governmental Operations Committee in the House. And you have members here from the JGO committee. My vice chair is Representative Bloss Jonathan Attal. Also a member of JGO would be Representative Richard Lizama. Representative Vicente Camacho are members of the JGO as well. And good morning and welcome to the House chambers.
Thank you, Chairwoman. We also want to recognize our staff at the Legislative Bureau who are here today to assist us. We have Legal Counsel Joe Bermudez. We have Legislative Assistants Giovanna Taitano and Cameron Nicholas. We have our Sergeant at Arms, Dennis Regis, and Mr. Keith Tawai. Thank you for being with us, gentlemen. Okay, we are going to move on to opening statements. Okay. Okay, so good morning and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us, for making time to be here today. Today's meeting is in regards to Executive Order 2021-09, effecting executive reorganization by transferring the agricultural quarantine section of the Department of Lands and Natural Resources to the Division of Customs Services of the Department of Finance, and directing the establishment of an Office of Information Technology within the Department of Finance. Safeguarding the CNMI's ecosystem and agriculture against invasive species is of utmost concern. Thank you all for being here today. We in the Commonwealth have always recognized the threat that invasive species pose to our native agriculture, economy, and natural resources. They are often hidden in agricultural cargo or inside passenger bags. Failure to detect and intercept these harmful pests imposes serious economic and social burdens on all residents of the CNMI. Invasive species cost hundreds of millions of dollars annually in lost agriculture revenue, property damage, and eradication programs. Focusing on preventions by improving agricultural inspections at our ports of entry is a very cost-effective strategy. Of course, economic costs are just one aspect of the consequences that would result from invasive species. Our beautiful natural environment is the foundation of our culture, our heritage, and tourism. Invasive species could permanently devastate our fragile ecosystem and in the process destroy our economy and our character. Nearly 60 years after its arrival on Guam, the brown tree snake continues to inflict terrible and irreversible damage on that island's ecosystem and economy. Guam's painful experience is a stark example of the dire consequences for any Pacific island that fails to keep out harmful invasive species. Despite having very limited resources, the Department of Agriculture under the Division of Agriculture under the Department of Lands and Natural Resources has done an amazing job with invasive species prevention and response. There's concern that this executive order and this transfer will disrupt and undermine the agricultural inspection mission. I am particularly interested in how we can enhance agricultural inspection which are critical for detecting harmful pests and diseases at our ports of entry. So this meeting will really examine how this executive order will positively or negatively impact our ability to safeguard our borders from invasive species and disease. I am so grateful for you being here today, and we really do look forward to the information and dialogue that we're going to share today. Please know that we will also clarify the steps that we can take, if we decide to take any, after this meeting. So the two committees will continue in discussion, and we will also get clarification from legal counsel on appropriate ways to respond to an executive order. Thank you. I now would like to recognize the chair of JGO for any opening remarks.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving us some of your time to hear from you guys directly. I think it's important that we hear your input whenever bills are proposed or executive orders are issued by the administration. It's important that the stakeholders, those most affected by these policy decisions, come to the table with us so we can help each other. And my purpose here as the JGO chair, I have jurisdiction, the committee, I'm sorry, not me. The committee has jurisdiction over any operations of the government. This executive order proposes a merger, a governmental reorganization, if you would. And that's why the JGO committee is here as well. It is our purpose here as JGO members to determine the economy, the efficiency of this merger. We want to hear the pros and cons of this so we can better address them either through legislation or a modification of the executive order. And that is the purpose of the JGO committee here and its members. So thank you for coming and making time to let us hear from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now would like to turn the floor over to Secretary of Finance to just deliver any opening remarks, and then we will go ahead and move across the room. Can you also please introduce any members of your team that you have with you today? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Sheila Babalta and Chairwoman Selena Babalta. Thank you for the opportunity to come and testify and share information and answer questions in regards to the executive order pertaining to the merger of quarantine and customs, as well as the Office of Information Technology. Just to make some notes, these actions were recommendations from the fiscal summit that was in the summer of 2020, and talked about consolidation and mergers with areas with similar responsibilities. Some of the positives is to streamline the processes at the border in terms of quarantine and customs. Also eliminates unnecessary silos of responsibilities and the resources to protect our borders, as well as it reduces cost overall for both organizations and come together and share resources as they currently do. I've heard a lot of positives regarding this merger, and a lot of the quarantine staff, I've heard a lot of positives. And so there are a few, prior to the merger, a few concerns from some of the personnel at quarantine. And so those are things that weren't resolved or discussed between Secretary Beneventi and myself. This was not just an overnight decision. This has been in communication over the last year and a half when I've been at finance. And so we're ready to answer any of your questions. But before have Secretary Beneventi share an opening remark, I'd like to introduce, obviously, we all know Director Joe Moffness and Director of now Customs and Quarantine, and I'll ask him to introduce his team with us, including those from quarantine.
Good morning, Madam Chairs, Sheila Babalta and Madam Chair Salina Babalta. First, thank you for the invitation to be here this morning to hear concerns from your committee, yourself and your committee. I also brought in a team from Tinian and Rhoda, quarantine officers, and Saipan that are here, so you can hear directly from them what is their sentiment regarding this merger. Just for your information, immediately after the executive order, with the approval of Secretary Atalik, I flew to Rhoda, first to Rhoda, because there were so many questions that was coming out from there. I met with the mayor, and I understand that there was also a schedule to meet with the DLNR with the mayor, but unfortunately I don't know what happened, but the DLNR already did not make it to the meeting. And then after I came back, I went to Tinian. I met up with the president director for DLNR and finance, and also the staff of or the quarantine officers and customs officers there, explaining ourselves. I'm always an advocate of a quarantine division. I've never considered them as low agency than customs. Even with, I mean, understand that this customs is not taking over quarantine, because that was the concern. We are not taking over. It's a merge, it's a marriage between the two agencies. Enforcing our borders, with customs ensuring that no illicit drugs or dangerous drugs entering the CNMI. We're taking the same position as ensuring that no pest or any invasive species would enter our borders. I reach out to USDA and let them also hear our plans with quarantine. That will continue the program. They are the experts in their field. We're just together at the border to ensure that nothing of any harmful pest would infiltrate our CNMI. I don't know if this is the right time, but I know, just for example, we have a container down at the seaport that has been sitting there for a week, maybe and a half, or almost 2 weeks. It has pest bugs inside the container. The protocol is to pick samples and send it to the USDA for verification. The result came back that it's not an actionable cause, meaning it's common. The box is common on the island, so no need for them to do anything else. Well, for us, it's zero tolerance. Whether it's actionable cause for USDA or not, for us, again, the policy is we will exterminate every box, whether it's common on the island or not. We will exterminate or fumigate or treat the container. It will not go out of our ports. So the container is sitting at our port. I know the arrangement has been made with a fumigation company to treat the container. So it's zero tolerance. Same position with us, with drugs, is zero tolerance, as the same position I'm taking with the invasive species or pests or bugs. It's zero tolerance. I've already informed the officers. You open a container, you see a bug fly across, close it immediately. We will not allow those kind of any bugs to enter our island. So I know that after the meetings with both Tinian and Rhoda, that there was a positive reception from the officers. They're happy. Like I said, they're not a subordinate to customs. We are equal. Of course, we will change. Every officers would have to change their title to customs and quarantine. officers. We also plan, because of their knowledge, their expertise in agricultural matters, we are creating a unit under the organizational charts, the biosecurity unit. They will focus on the agricultural enforcement. They will be the point of contact with the USDA. So these are the plans that we're moving, and I want to assure everyone, the committee, that it's the enforcement at the ports. It's just this merger enhanced. Again, I'm in full support of both customs and quarantine officers at the ports to conduct the enforcement part. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I went too fast and I forgot to introduce my team. We have a quarantine, well, customs and quarantine officer now, but just for purpose of today's meeting, quarantine officer Joe Atalik is the OIC in charge in Rhoda. We have Major Nisena, who customs from Tinian. We have Officer Fatima Borja, who's the Saipan quarantine officer. We have Officer Bob Ranges. He's the OIC for quarantine Tinian. And I have Officer Colonel James Guerrero. He's special advisor to the Customs Director. Now, also I have my team in the back, officers. Colonel Atalik is with us, and captains and Aldan and plenty here. Just so you know, if there's any, again, to hear your concerns, listen to the inquiries, and we'll try our best to answer and clarify what is the issues or concerns that others have for us to address this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Magnus. I would now like to recognize Secretary Beneventi for your opening remarks.
Good morning. I'm sorry for being late. It was raining outside. But good morning to all you members, Representative Sheila, Chairwoman for the Natural Resources, and Representative Selena, both about us for the JGO, and to the good members of this committee. Thank you for inviting me for this public hearing. It's a pleasure to be here to justify the reason behind the executive order. As you know, we stand supportive on this executive order. Secretary Atalik has mentioned what transpired within this transfer, and we came into terms sitting down and addressing the need that what needs to be protected. So DLNR is again very supportive. I know that with this executive order, it means well to be better protecting our border lines. And being in the same offices or areas in terms of seaport and airport, these two agencies or these two sections of our government are the protectors of any entries, be it from drugs to contrabands to endangered or threatened species that are being smuggled. They also monitor from plant protection to animal protections, those that might be illegal to enter. So they have a lot of role, and combining them into one office is considered the best to better protect our border. Again, it's a division of custom and quarantine. There's that word, and that means well to determine their control, their knowledge of enforcing any illegal products that might come in. And they as the director mentioned, it stands aside in the quarantine section, and it is important to do that. I reflect that stated that you cannot deny the quarantine as a separate or under control of custom. It has to be a controlled area of the quarantine, and doing that so in this new transfer, it means well. And again, I support the executive order. and looking forward to any issues or concerns that you might have in regards to the matter. But I know that there might be some little disagreement, but believe me, there's in the first stage, it always feels that way. But as time comes along, things works out. And I can say that during our term with the quarantine, just previously, I just honestly can't feel that I'm very kind of sad or how you say, ashamed, because right now, just in this temporary transfer, I look at my former quarantine officers having beautiful or new uniforms. And when he was under DLNR, I didn't have that because I didn't have that money. So anyway, this all brings together into one, knowing that they are together in this role, and then the obligations and the regulations that they might look at. So with that said, I would like to introduce also a member of the DLNR team, Dr. Ignacio de la Cruz. He's our state veterinarian, and also in his job of line is providing work relations with the quarantine in terms of any products that might be coming in, with his knowledge of animals that might be in disease or some kind of a pest that might needs not to be imported. So I'm glad to have Dr. De La Cruz provide public any information that you might have. I apologize for the Director of Agriculture again. He had a issue right away at Cacman Station for one of the wells that just broke down, so he had to be the contractor. So with that said, thank you, and I look forward to addressing any concerns that you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Benavente. Dr. De La Cruz, welcome. Would you like to deliver any opening remarks?
Yes. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this body. The two fine secretaries, Finance, and of course my boss, Dilena. I welcome the present merger of quarantine and customs, but it remains to be seen how it's going to work out. There's an article before us, put out by PPQ officer Phil Santos. This is regarding the not very favorable comment about how the merger has been working. And he mentioned that since the merger was effective, more than 200 diseases and pests came into Guam. And that since PPQ division has been doing the job, only 8 have been let in or incorporated as part of the merger team. And I hope this is not going to be happening to the new Division of Customs and Quarantine, because we need more inspectors to safeguard our plants and animals. And even though the number of customs employees are high, they are not trained, to handle agricultural quarantine issues. And I hope that some kind of training will come about, soon enough, so that customs employees will be adequately trained to handle or to help out with the agricultural quarantine matters. My biggest concern is that agricultural quarantine employees must also be put at the same level of responsibility and supervisory positions as customs. So in order to make the program work well, there should be this kind of arrangement. And I hope that with this merger that the section on animal health, matters will continue to be taken care of I'll not be put aside for, yeah. Uh, but I'm hoping for the best. Yeah. Uh, uh, we are learning, from our neighbor Guam about how this merger is coming about, and it's not that good yet. Now, however, this report is coming from just one PPQ employee, but we are worried because since the merger happened, the rhinoceros beetle was introduced in Guam. And look at all the disruption that this was causing, to the coconut plantation over there in Guam. But now it's already on road. Hopefully, it's not going to spread to Tinian and Saipan. We also have a very bad, very destructive viral disease of coconuts in Guam called the Kadang-Kadang disease, introduced from the Philippines. Now, this disease has been in Guam for quite some time already, and luckily, it's not. It's proven to be not as destructive as we were, led to believe. Yeah. So in the animal health section, we have at least 7 very, very high consequence pathogenic organisms or diseases that we should be really worried about. We have African swine fever and foot and mouth disease, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, high and low pathogenic avian influenza, which is a zoonotic disease that can kill people. Rabies, of course, is top of the list. Exotic Newcastle disease, West Nile virus. Yeah. So we have to worry about these diseases, and I hope that the newly formed division of Customs and Quarantine will be fully aware about these highly catastrophic, very destructive diseases of animals. Yeah. That continued cooperation will go on, and training, lots of training. Well, right away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. De La Cruz, for your opening remarks and sharing, insightful information with us. Before we proceed, I'd like to recognize Rep. Donald Manglonia, Chair of Ways and Means. Thank you for joining us, Representative. Okay, so before we move into questioning, I would just like to be clear upfront as to what our options are when these two committees, would consider when responding to the executive order. So I'd like to recognize our legal counsel to go ahead and clarify the first question that I have as chair of the Natural Resources Committee, and that would be, what are appropriate ways to respond to an executive order? What are our options, and what are the requirements?
The NMI Constitution under Article 3, Section 5 provides for the authority of the governor to issue the executive order, and it provides that he may make changes in the allocation of the offices, agencies, and instrumentalities and their functions, duties that are necessary for efficient administration. In addition, it says that if these changes affect existing law, and it is very clear that it does, there shall be set forth in the executive orders, which shall be submitted to the legislature and shall become effective 60 days after submission to the legislature, unless specifically modified or disapproved by a majority of both houses. This phrase, unless specifically modified, allows for an amendment. The timing issue is 60 days. Again, it's upon the date that it was submitted to the legislature. With the amendments, I guess it will depend on what information is gathered today and that are important, and those must be looked at if the committees desire to make any amendments to the um, proposed executive order. Again, the same thing has to be done at the Senate side. So there are a lot of ifs at this point, but if the committee desires any amendment, it can do so. Again, the amendments will probably be based on what's transpired today.
Thank you, legal counsel. And can you please verify for us the date it was submitted to the legislature, and then our due date to respond to the executive order?
Based on a copy I have, it says it was received on April 28th. So therefore, April, May, June, I guess June 28th would be the safest date to provide any modification or yes, yeah, June 28th. Unless it takes no action, then it'll become effective.
Okay. Thank you, legal counsel. So clarified, that the due date will be on June 28th for any kind of action, should there be, after our meeting today and after further discussion by both committees. So now we will move into the next part of our agenda, new business, which is the executive order, where we will open the floor for questions from the members. And we will go ahead and review Executive Order 2021-09 and really examine the language that is there, and also discuss implementation of this executive order, what has been done so far, the cost, and future plans for the departments. So I will go ahead and begin by asking the Secretary of Finance, Director Mafnes or Director Benavente, how you have responded to the executive orders together. How have you begun to implement the executive order? Has there been meetings? Has there been staff update meetings and so forth? So can you just please brief us on how your departments have worked together?
Thank you, Chairwoman. As soon as the executive order was signed, Secretary Benavente, Director Gomoro, and myself and Director Mafnes met to talk about the transition period in these 60 days to work out any issues that we may have. We know that 60 days will be the effective date, but what are we going to do in between? We met both with quarantine and customs staff. So did Dylan, our secretary, met with his staff regarding the executive order. Meetings, as Director Mafnes mentioned, we sent the team down to Rhoda to meet with the quarantine staff and as well as also the customs, and we did that also for Tinian. On Saipan was done the next day, or a couple of days after the executive order was signed. There's ongoing discussions, which were all brought up in some of the concerns, meeting with USDA, talk about the goals of this merger and what are some of the challenges and opportunities. And we see more opportunities in this merger than we do some of the challenges. Dr. Del Cruz mentioned about training. Those are all in discussion and including us signing an MOU with NMC for training for customs and quarantine, as well as it's not just quarantine to get training on customs, it's also customs officers getting trained in enforcement of quarantine stuff. But as the director mentioned, there's a subdivision, there's a section, not just quarantine, but also pertaining to just the quarantine staff. We know the non-enforcement part of it. Ensuring training is continued, ensuring that we're up to date in any new technologies to do our work to protect the borders. So those are the things that we've been in discussion. We haven't, after that initial meeting, Secretary and I haven't met formally about the merger, but we know both sides and both teams. Director Moftis has been very proactive in this and trying to help and get everyone up to speed. What we look at this as we have an ongoing desk audit also at the Department of Finance, and we've audited all our divisions. We are down to our last division, which is the division of customs, and now with quarantine, so the timing is perfect. Quarantine officers will be, personnel will be, will have a desk audit just to ensure that in their area they're doing what they were hired to do, and that they are compensated in the place at the proper salary schedule. And so that is being, actually it has started, in fact, last week or the week before, in terms of the desk audit. And so this all comes in preparation of, prior to the 60 days, to have a report to the governor, and of course to share with the legislature our findings and our plan moving forward in terms of the merger. Any details in terms of the discussions and meetings, I'll leave it for Director Moftis to share, as it's been his team who I have appointed. I appointed him to make sure to create a transition team to include all of quarantine and anyone at DLRR to make sure that the merger is smooth and that everyone and all issues are addressed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Director Moftis, would you like to add anything to that or any findings from the transition? Has the transition reports been finalized?
Not yet, ma'am. We're just, we're addressing all angles, to make the merger work. Again, immediately after the executive order, I reach out to Tina and Rhoda, and of course Saipan, because like I said, there's so many questions, and I understand, and so we addressed those. And after they understood our plans, I know that I have the support of the quarantine officers with this merge. Dr. De La Cruz alluded to an article that was written by, I guess, a former or current PPQ. The practice in container inspection in Guam and the CMA is totally different. And I've addressed that to them because they've reached out to me also, how do you guys do it? And we don't do site inspection. Our inspection area is contained at the seaport. For example, for a container inspection, it's there at the seaport. We don't go to the various sites to do inspection there. Because to me, I've known that it's very high risk. You're moving containers all around the island, open up, of course, you're spreading the disease, if that's the practice. We don't do that. Like I said, I reached out to USDA. They too were concerned with this. And after explaining our plans, Secretary mentioned about creating this, we call it the biosecurity unit, and they will focus only in agricultural enforcement. They're not gonna touch on excise tax issues or what. It's border enforcement on agriculture. They are the experts.
Thank you. That's really reassuring to hear because I am very interested to see your organizational chart that will be updated, right, because of this merger. And that has been the main concern for me after speaking with representatives from USDA, from directors of other ports and other Pacific Islands. It's this merger that happens where we want to prevent the disruption, right, of the mission for quarantine and agriculture, the protection and safeguarding of our borders. So I'm very, very happy to hear that. And just, I want to be very mindful and respectful of everyone's time. It is 10:49 a.m. and I really would like to also open the floor to any other members if they have questions or comments regarding the merger. And I will go ahead and recognize Rep. Lizama.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, gentlemen, ladies, for being here today. One question, and do you identify, since most of you guys, the customs are the airport, identify a place for this other additional personnel that's coming to your division?
Oh, no, quarantine is already there. And so nothing changes except how we organize and manage protecting the border. There's a quarantine office at the seaport, at an airport, and so at all ports.
Okay. And for Mr. De La Cruz, is he going to be assigned to, is he still with the DNR? Okay.
Yeah. Dr. De La Cruz will be under the LNR. He has his own work operation in terms of the animal health section.
Most of the questions are already covered, right, especially with the chairwoman, and I'm looking forward to seeing that organization will be up to par. And I think that the blue uniforms is very visible and more recognizable. I mean, when you come to the border, these are the people that will protect our islands. So I hear Backman. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Lizama. Thank you, Rep. Lizama. I'd like to recognize Chairwoman Obata.
Thank you, Representative Shiva. I have a question for both quarantine actually and customs. Does customs receive any federal funds at this time?
No, we don't.
Does quarantine receive any grants or anything?
No, ma'am. No, Chair.
How will this marriage of customs and quarantine affect any outreach programs that quarantine may have or agriculture may have? And as well as customs, how will this marriage between these two divisions affect it? Will one have to be shelved over the other? Can somebody answer that?
Like Director Moflis mentioned in his opening remarks, the programs are not changing. There's no changing. We're just coming together and supporting each other. Any current programs that are with the quarantine division, they'll still continue to do that. In fact, like in the Office of Information Technology part of the EO, it's not taking over, but they're also gaining a lot of more support. They're gaining not just staffing support, but they're also gaining financial support because customs, we do collect excise tax, we collect CQ funds, and this allows us to also spread that funds to them and for them to continue their programs, or if they want to add new programs, we're open to those ideas.
So it's a marriage by name only. Is that what I'm hearing?
No names, but also in terms of management. So they're now not part of DLNR, but they're now part of Customs and Department of Finance in terms of protecting the border and any of its programs. We're saying is there will be probably, I would assume, changes in the future, but there's no changes today, but changes in the future for the better, not to eliminate anything or to disrupt any current services that they provide.
I agree. There could be benefits as well as deficits in this merger, and that's what we're here, to hear from you guys. I wanted to see the pros and cons of this merger. Director Moffness, you mentioned that the merger is an enhancement to who in particular, to customs, to quarantine, and if this enhancement, can you elaborate further what is enhanced? From what I'm hearing from the Secretary of Finance, each division still functions as if they were not merged, right?
Not really, Madam Chair. Like I said, I reach out to the USDA because, they've been coming over, they've been working with quarantine. And I asked them for names that they would suggest for this biosecurity unit. So they gave me names, not all the quarantine officers. They just gave me names. These are to their experience or working with the quarantine officers, these are the names that would be ideal for the unit. So I take that suggestion, and also in line of that, I communicate with them and I assure them that we still want to work with them, USDA. Like I said, the quarantine officers are expert in their fields. So I truly respect that, and that will continue to support that. We're concerned with the, border enforcement. So I gave, same the secretary, I know Secretary Benevientian, telling that we will give 100% support with this merger between the customs and quarantine.
Go ahead, Mr. Triangura.
Okay, I just want to give a little bit of an overview as to our efforts. There's been at least a couple of meetings that has been undertaken between the customs team here, as well as the quarantine, or rather the quarantine transition team here, and the quarantine officers down on Road 18, and both of them actually expressed support. So when this developed, this kind of like a shock to us, because we have not heard of any negativity that nobody shared any concerns that we should be alarmed with when we had those meetings. But other than that, no, Madam Chair, as we've reached out to the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Guam. We wanted to talk to the head person there, but unfortunately, the head person is currently on leave. But we were able to talk to the person that's now in charge there. So we made some inquiries, and there were a lot of exchanges as to recommendations as to how it would assist this merger in terms of solidifying our efforts to be able to pay attention to the quarantine side of this particular new merger. So one of the trainings that was identified was the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service training. What this is the basic training is it's a 40-hour course, and then there's another training or a much more intense training, which is I believe an 80-hour course that every quarantine officer is required to take in order for them to be actually sort of classified as a full-fledged quarantine officer. So this is one of the trainings, and this is based on correspondence that we've had with USDA. This is one of the trainings that will be required for every customs officer to undertake, so that they understand what it is exactly that they need to look for in terms of performing the quarantine aspect of their responsibility. The long-term goal here is that there will no longer be a customs inspector and a quarantine inspector. They will all be called customs and quarantine officers. But there's coordination that's currently happening between Team DOF and the Office of Personnel Management as to how we would arrive there. So that's why there's moving parts. One other thing is also the MOA that's been signed between our secretary and the Northern Marianas College. So we're adding new courses to that particular academy setting that will help address the issue of quarantine. And at our last meeting with NMC, one of the things that we have discussed was to actually bring USDA into the fold here, where the types of training materials that they're able to provide would be something that would be included in the academy setting, and the recruits that undergo that training program would also get college credits. And the reason why it's not that difficult to do that in this case is because currently USDA USDA staff there in Guam or training staff that there in Guam are actually also doing that with the Guam Community College. So we're trying to put things together and see how at the end of the day, everyone that's assigned to what is now the Division of Customs and Quarantine will be performing dual roles. But in terms of how we conduct our operations and how and you know, making sure that whatever initiatives that were there prior to the executive order, those things will continue to be carried on. If there were prior coordination, say for example, between two particular units within the LNR prior to the executive order, we see no reason why that particular relationship should have to be broken up only because there's a change in you know, whichever agency is overseeing that. So one last thing that I'd like to address is that also I think that it is fundamentally unfair to compare how Guam Customs and Quarantine does their operations there or conducts the operations versus how we do it here. We don't allow containers to be moved to sites so that we can come over later and inspect them. We do inspections at the ports, and that is a very important thing to take into consideration, especially now that we have quarantine as part of our responsibility. Allowing that container to move from point A to point B is something probably that resulted in, you know, all of this mass invasive species infestation that's happening there. But, you know, to be fair, you know, the Oceania Customs Organization that really recognized the Cinnamon, given a lot of praises to the Cinnamon Customs Division. They actually turned to us to provide guidance to some of our sister islands, including Guam. So, and it's not just them, even the Department of Interior sometimes come down and ask us to help Guam out. So it's very different. How they do things there and how they do things, how we do things here are very different. But where this body would be really helpful on is as we begin to streamline the processes and smoothen out the types of initiatives that are required to be undertaken to make to help us make or rather to help us do a better job. We at some point may be coming to you guys so that we can see how where the deficits are and perhaps address that as a matter of public policy. So that we make sure that we stay consistent with whatever duties and responsibilities that we currently have. We want to make sure also that they do not run in conflict with one another. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. De Younger. I have two questions. One, I understand some customs officers are armed, and will this affect the new quarantine officers? I'm concerned about that.
Well, the plan is because there will be,
after they go through all the training, the plan is to arm them actually, because they are customs and quarantine officers, but they would have to go through the training, especially with the use of firearms.
Thank you, Director Martinez. I'd like to refer to the legal counsel. If that is allowable, just because of a merger, the law is very specific as to who can be armed. Legal counsel?
Currently, there's a statute that defines the law enforcement officers. I will look at it, but I am not sure their quarantine is under the definition of law enforcement officers. If not, then it needs an amendment to the statute.
I'd like for you guys to consider that. I'm familiar with the SAFE Act because I was looking at it recently to make amendments to it. So please take a look at that and let's see how we can help you guys with that. I have one comment to Mr. Gideon Guerrero James. You mentioned it was fundamentally wrong to compare Guam to Saipan, and I can understand that because of the differences of operations, right? But I think it is important that we compare ourselves to others who are successful or who have issues with their programs so we can learn and not make the same mistakes. So I take a different opinion from yours. Also, it appears to me that as managers and leaders who are trying to implement this merger, that you guys are just implementing things and learning as you go along. What I hope to see in our department leaders is a full-on analysis and implementation, either by phase. With this merger, I had hoped that you guys had considered everything. But what I'm hearing from you guys now is that, we will learn as we go along. But what I'm interested in seeing from leaders of our departments is that all these cost analysis, all these personnel changes that impact departments from A to Z be thought out and planned out before being given an executive order that says we're doing this. And that's just my personal observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just recognize Secretary Benventi and then Rep. Camacho.
How you two, Rep?
Thank you, Secretary. Go ahead, Rep.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome everybody. In the opening remarks, the word merger was really about the only word we were using, merger. But on the executive order, it says reorganization. I would like for the council to clarify that, if you would. Council, please. Thank you.
Probably the word reorganization is the umbrella, and the merger is, it talks about how that reorganization is to basically merge customs and quarantine. So I think reorganization is the big word. Underneath it is to merge customs and quarantine together.
So clarified, thank you. And yeah, that's kind of what's confusing, because I'm hearing there's not going to be a breakup, but eventually there'll be some changes, right? That's what I'm hearing. So I need to clarify the two words. Reorganization is very simple, but merger, if you use that word merger, especially in the private sector, one has to give everything up. And that's kind of like what I'm already hearing from one word is all I've heard, reorganization, since this whole conversation was carried. Merger was the word. So I don't know, I just need to be clear. Because when we start to merge, everything does change. Reorganization is very different, at least from my understanding. But I'm hearing it, I'm already hearing it. Thank you. How are you?
Thank you, Rep. Camacho. I just wanted to point out for the members and for our guests that on page 2 of the executive order, there is language there. At the bottom of the page, it is ordered that the Division of Customs and Quarantine, under number 1, the agricultural quarantine section of the Department of Lands and Natural Resources is transferred to the Department of Finance and shall be combined with and fall under the Division of Customs Services. So I think this is more clarification language if anyone would like to refer to that section. I now would like to recognize Rep. Mengolon.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Director and Secretaries. My question is more on the staffing. Currently, how many customs personnel fall under you directly?
Customs office about 72 here in Saipan.
And how many will be transferring over from quarantine?
16.
16. Is my understanding that there will be an academy soon, or is that the term you use also for?
Actually, we're calling it a modified training for the quarantine officers, and that is just to, apprise them on the authorities and touch just the basic taxing provisions, and also on the firearms safety. It's the modified training is still under, we're still going back and forth on what to provide. It's only 3 weeks for the quarantine officers, and we're also looking forward for our officers, customs, to be trained or apprised of what is the quarantine, role at the ports. So that is but there's other also quarantine that wants to avail the academy, the full-blown. I think it's about 5 months academy that would earn them 40 credit hours if they complete. So there are quarantine officers that wants to avail that too.
But this academy is for new hirees. Is that what's going to happen with this 5-month long program? Is that for new hirees?
The academy program is really for personnel that have not undergone any type of prior law enforcement academy. The modified training that Director Muffner is alluding to are for those quarantine officers that have already undertaken a prior academy. The other part of this is that also, let's say we have a situation where a quarantine officer has an existing associate's degree. Since we are tied into NMC, and they're not required to undertake those courses, so those particular personnel can go through the modified training program. Everyone that has not gone through any type of academy will be required to undergo the Customs and Biosecurity Academy.
Okay, yeah. So, from my understanding, the modified training are for current employees that need the additional training, but the academy, which is the one I'm actually more concerned about, that will be happening soon. Yes.
Yes. Well, yes and no, because for example, like there are some quarantine officers. There's actually a pretty sizable amount of them that have actually taken prior combined law enforcement academies. So those individuals or those officers are not going to be required to go through the academy. There's some of them that also have associate degrees, so they would not need to go through the full-blown academy. Then, and all of those personnel will be referred to the modified training program.
Okay. Do you have the numbers of how many you're looking at of individuals that will be going through academy?
There's a minimum of 20 that is required in order for NMC to actually undergo or start an academy. So I don't have the numbers in terms of where how many quarantine officers. I don't have it with me at this point. That's something that I can provide you at a later time. Although we do have the information, we just don't have it with us now. The other part of this is that we're also filling out filling some of our prior new vacancies with customs. So we're going to be combining the amount of personnel or the amount of recruits that are needed in order for us to actually start an academy. Because there's a minimum of 20 cadets that have to be made part of the academy. There's also because of this would be the very first what you call it a certificate new academy program. So some of the quarantine officers that may want to undergo the academy will be given that particular option. But there's a process and there's scheduling issues and all of those things that have to be worked out before we actually are able to send them. And this is not just an academy. This is actually an academy, and although the MOA that was signed says that it's a 40 credit program, actually what we've been able to, what we're currently working on with NMC right now is that at the end of the graduation, these new recruits will actually graduate with their associate degrees. So it's a work in progress, and we're hopeful that we would be able to start an academy sometime in August or September.
Okay, thank you. Well, the reason I brought it up, and before I came here, on my way, I was actually listening through the legislature site, and Secretary of Finance brought up the results of the fiscal response summit, and that merging, could save costs, but there's a plan to have an academy which will bring in new customs and quarantine personnel, but you're already getting 16, maybe a little bit more, joining the customs and quarantine and becoming one agency. And so I'm just concerned about the additional FTEs that the division is planning to bring in when you're already getting the extra personnel from quarantine. And so that was just the concern that I wanted to bring up. Yes, Secretary.
Thank you, Chairman Melania. If I may, Chairwoman, although we are together with both divisions coming together, are adding 16 to the total that I'm used to, but we also have a lot of vacancies at Customs, and we're in preparation of when we do reopen. We don't have the full personnel available to handle if we go back to pre-pandemic numbers at the airport and seaport, as well as the post office. So we do have a lot of vacancies available that we need to fill in preparation of that. The additional personnel coming from quarantine, not all of them, they're not all going to perform custom duties right away. They still need to go through this training, as they explained, so that eventually they will be customs and quarantine together. Those that are not like that, then we have also that biosecurity division section that will be focused on the quarantine issues and ensuring that all these USDA rules and areas and directives that are all being abided by, separate from the actual inspection part and border control. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, to an extent. And that's why there's a modified training, so that they don't have to go through the whole academy. But yeah, my concern was just that we're already gaining the expertise and the additional manpower from quarantine, but yet there's still this plan for an academy that may bring in new FDs when even the vacancies were are going to be filled by the 16. It's just extra duties for customs and quarantine personnel. Yeah, so it's just something that, we wanted to see how much more personnel we're trying to bring in when our goal, one of the goals is to try to reduce costs and merge responsibilities. I yield. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Maiguña. I'd like to recognize Secretary Benavente.
Thank you. Well, I just want to kind of answer your question from what transpired in terms of the executive order. But just to reference, yes, there was a previous discussion prior to this executive order between myself and the Director of Customs. He recommended a certain control. From the beginning, it was more like a supervision that I addressed to provide him that authority under DLNR, giving him the authority. But eventually turned around where he kind of stated that maybe it's best to merge these two. And I felt, well, if it's going to be something that is not provided an obligation for the quarantine, then I don't feel comfortable. But eventually he mentioned that, with this combined transfer would be the custom and quarantine. So it turned out, as to what transpired. And again, there is also a concern that we do have an MOA, a memorandum of agreement with the USDA. And this USDA, it's a five-year new MOA. And it deals with the regulations that must be complied by the quarantine, and provide also information, data that are recorded from all the shipping documents. And the staffs didn't know this. And also in this transaction, USDA also provides the training for this quarantine, because there's issues in regards to the foreign containers and the US containers. So there is that protective measures that the USDA are very highly concerned, and we have to deal with that. And the quarantine are really knowledgeable in that, because the common communication between the USDA and Guam and with them are constantly in terms of what's shipping. If shipment comes from Singapore, shipment comes from Philippines, there's a direct communication between the quarantine officers to USDA and making sure this. Now, allowing this transfer or merging together is also something that I feel will be proper with the customs and quarantine, because I feel that now there will be an established, which USDA has been reminding me for the longest time, we need a containment facility. And containment facility is what I'm hearing, and that I believe within this merging might happen, maybe will happen. And that containment facility is a sealed warehouse. It doesn't have to be, 100 by 100. It's just a small inside, securing the container, open it, so anything that comes out is in that containment area. So all you gotta do is close it, fumigate it, and always there. So those are the most priorities that I feel is in constant communication with the director. And this, like you said, security protection, all this would happen. And we don't have that, but knowing that Customs has so much of their controls in the seaport and all that facility, I think this thing will be better, and ensuring that nothing spreads out in terms of pest, invasive species, because right now having that containment before it ships out to any vendors, businesses, it's open, secured in the container, whatever it is, lumpers or whatever that has some kind of issues of bugs or whatever, it's all fumigated and secured. So I think eventually the MOA will be terminated with DLNR, and it would now change to the Department of Finance with the USD.
Yes, thank you for mentioning the MOA. And before I recognize Director Mafnes, I do want to note that in the executive order, it does state that all rules, orders, contracts, and agreements relating to the functions transferred to the Department of Finance and the Division of Customs and Quarantine lawfully entered into prior to the effective date of this executive order shall continue to be effective until expired, revised, amended, repealed, or terminated. So are there any other agreements that you'd like to
Well,
state for the record, other than the MOA?
other than the,
USDA?
only, well, my knowledge is only the MOA with the USDA, yes.
And I just would like to recommend that that be part of the transition report, that this body would like to also review once that transition report is complete. Secretary of Finance, do you have an idea of when that report will be complete?
It's always been targeted for before the end of the 60 days.
Thank you. Director Montes, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, Secretary, actually Benavente mentioned about the container. We are in the process of moving to a building next to us where really it's contained. The containers are going to be, the new inspection facility is a contained area. We are also planning, trying to design something like a net that when we open the container, no bugs or pests would even fly out, to ensure that, again, ensuring again that no any invasive species or pests would come out. So those are in the plans, and so we're already negotiating with the owner of the building next door to utilize that. That would be a perfect spot for container inspection. Also, in regarding the executive order, the plan to merge customs and quarantine is really more than 2 years. We've been going back and forth. One of the things that I observed when is that it would create more efficient, bring more efficiency to the importers. Again, and also with the USDA, as mentioned, I love partnerships with other agencies, whether it's federal or local. But even in the absence of any MOA, we will ensure that our borders are protected against illegal drugs entering our CNMI, and also pest, invasive species, anything that would affect our community. So I welcome. I know that I've spoken to USDA, and I think the change will be again for the new division or Department of Finance from the LNR. So that is, I think they're waiting for June 27 for this to take place. Then they would come up the MOA.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very reassuring to hear words and phrases like collaboration, partnership, streamlining, efficiency. That's definitely, I think the intent behind this kind of executive order, right? We just want to ensure that there is transparency and accountability when it comes to the transition, because really transition for anything is such a disruptive time, and the easier we can make it for the departments and for especially the staff is really the goal. So part of the executive order does state that all personnel transferred pursuant to this executive order shall maintain their current positions and status in the classified civil service or in the accepted services, as the case may be. The Office of Personnel Management shall ensure an orderly transfer of personnel. Have you had any meetings or discussion with OPM?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Yes, I have had a couple meetings with them. And so, and including, as I mentioned earlier, a desk audit will be conducted. And so when the desk audit is complete, also they want to ensure and make sure that they're placed properly for whatever, based on their job descriptions and where they're classified. And so I've had a couple meetings already with Director Franny, and so those are still ongoing. She's going to be sending letters or informing the individual quarantine members of the executive order, and that process will be starting. And so whatever information or letter she gives them, they can have their one-on-one or discussions if there's any issues regarding their current status. But
Thank
the
you.
executive order is not going to change anything. If anything, I think it's going to help them and boost them to the level where we are at customs.
Thank you. That is reassuring to hear as well. Before I recognize Rep. Maglonia and Rep. Angel Demapan, I do have a question in regards to the number of positions that will be transferred. So Secretary Beneventi did provide the organizational chart with your budget submission, and under agricultural quarantine section, there are 16 positions, but 6 are vacant. Is this accurate? Are there currently 6 vacant positions under quarantine? So the total number of personnel to be moved would actually be 10?
The total number will be 16, including vacant positions.
Okay. Thank you very much. For the first round, I just want to recognize Rep. Demapan, and just in the interest of time, it is 11:29.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And there's not a lot of really detailed questions that we can ask because you're really in the planning stages of this or in the process of effectuating a transition. But there were a lot of words that were thrown out, and the chair just reiterated a lot of those words, and I just want to throw one more out there, and that's parity. We talked about a modified training program, and we talked about transfer of employees and restructuring, and I just want to make sure that as you go through this process, that you keep in mind parity to make sure that the quarantine section is coming in from a different department, and we don't want quarantine employees and officers to feel that they're the new kid on the block or the step brother or sister employees of this newly formed division of customs and quarantine. And so just to keep in mind that we level the playing field when your modified training program is implemented, however modified they are, that it's conducive and it's fair for customs quarantine officers to be in the same program and vie for the same accomplishments as customs officers. And also in your staffing pattern to ensure that quarantine section employees don't feel inferior and that they all have to report to customs officers. I think it's important that we make sure that that playing field is equal. Director Mafnes, you are now the Director of Customs and Quarantine, so I'm sure that as you have done in Customs, you will continue to implement these programs effectively in Customs and Quarantine. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you so much, Rep. Demapan. I completely support his statement and agree because we value your work. We value the work of Division of Quarantine and of Customs. And so we just want to ensure that this, transfer and implementation of the merger will continue to encourage our leaders and our community to value the work of both divisions. I recognize Rep. Maglonia.
Thank you, Chair. And this is just a short, just one question. And thank you, Rep. Angel, for bringing up parity. Because of this merger and the added responsibilities, and I'm sorry if I missed it, maybe it was brought up. Would there be any changes in terms of pay as well?
I can answer that. At the moment, their current status does not change. The executive order ensures that. If there is pay change, like I mentioned earlier, and after the desk audits, I'm pretty sure it's all going to go up, a step or two. That's our observation, and even my discussions with OPM, they've noticed that as well. So they've started their analysis on the personnel there in preparation of this marriage.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you, Rep. Maglonia. Any other members have any questions?
Can I?
Yes, Secretary, go
Can I
ahead.
just make a correction? There's only one vacant in the quarantine out of the 16.
Out of the 16, there's one vacant. What is that position?
The quarantine inspector.
Quarantine inspector,
One.
1. Okay, thank you for that. And I look forward to your updated organizational chart as well. Okay, thank you, Secretary. Anyone else? Representative?
Thank you again. Just want to add up, including that family line of Rep. Ammonia and Rep. Mapan. I spoke to you before this thing started. We don't want to see those personnel from the quarantine coming to you and being treated, differently. I've gotten so many calls about the move and when you look at an individual, 30 some years, 20 some years, 28 some years, I'm talking about 20 and 30 years, that are still within the same salary bracket. And you have customs that are within the same number of years, and they're not merging. But this guy from quarantine still below a poverty level. Please, I ask you to look at the pay scale and implement it as fast as possible. Appreciate it. Thank you. See you back.
Thank you, Rep. Lizama. Yes, as fast as possible. Thank you, Rep. Lizama. So at this time, I just want to give us an opportunity to kind of transition over to the second part of the executive order, just briefly. It is 11:35, and because you do have the 2 committees here, I wanted to just kind of turn the page on the quarantine section of the executive order, because this dialogue was very helpful and very reassuring, and the committee will continue to discuss and then communicate in writing to the secretaries in regards to this transition report, which is something we'd like to see, the updated organizational chart, and then maybe any other questions the committee members may have. But I'd like to state for the record that the comments made by the members and by your leadership team has been very reassuring, because we do support collaborative functions and necessary efficiency in our government. And by utilizing the same facilities and being located in the same areas, one would think this would be a great step towards, an efficient government, right? So thank you very much for that. I just wanted to turn the floor over to Secretary of Finance. If you had anything you'd like to state for the record in regards to establishing an Office of Information Technology within the Department of Finance, which is something I completely support. I believe this body supports. We want to keep up with current technology, and we want to provide better services to our community. So if you have any statements you'd like to make in regards to that?
Sure, I would love to. If I may, Chairwoman, could I excuse our customs and quarantine if there's no more?
Sure, yes, you are.
I need to talk to Secretary. Sorry, the Illinois Secretary, you're not excused yet.
All right.
Thank you.
But yes, the Division of Customs Services, thank you very much for being here, Director Mafna. Yes, we will take a short recess just to say
Goodbye.
goodbye.
Excuse me.
Thank you for having me share some comments in regards to the executive order and the part two of it of the establishment of an Office of Information Technology. Since being appointed and confirmed by the Senate as Secretary of Finance, one of my major goals was to update our current financial management system, as well as to ensure that our security is enforced and is redundant to ensure that a lot of our taxpayer information is protected. I was informed in my first several weeks early in my appointment that we did a friendly IRS audit on our financial systems and processes. And we had many recommendations and deficiencies. Of that, 90% of the deficiencies can be resolved just by upgrading our hardware and our security issues. Because we're talking taxpayer social security numbers, taxpayer data. And so as I learned, as I've already also organized my division at the time, EDP. I also noticed that I didn't have the personnel, proper personnel in this in my EDP. In terms of the overall global, they were great in keeping our current JD Edwards alive. Outstanding job. I really praise them for keeping that. But we needed to move our systems, from the 1980s versions to bring it up to speed to today's technology. And so as I gathered more data, even the Department of Finance were sending emails on everyone had personal email accounts. We didn't have a central email system or a server. So that was one of the first things we did. So we made sure we're sending emails about different taxpayer information and it's going to a personal email address. Even if they made the email address dof.david@gmail. If the employee leaves, I don't own that email and all that data that could be a communication in terms of documents that be attached or information about taxpayer. I can't protect that. And so we established we got a new server and manage our own email and all this. And then as we looked into the financial management system, we started going out to all the agencies and departments anyway, just to make sure that processes are being addressed. And I've learned that a lot of agencies either didn't have their own IT or they didn't even know or they weren't guided properly. And so knowing that I'm bringing in a new financial system, knowing that I also upgraded my hardware and my server and infrastructure side, I knew there was a lot of risk at a lot of the departments. And so I actually recommended to the last legislature to establish a new department of IT. And so anyway, that didn't pan out as I was still doing my research and gathering data to make recommendations for this new office. Anyway, as we went through and invited all agencies to participate in the RFP process of the new system, I learned that a lot of deficiencies out there and not even protected with even a simple firewall. A lot of people didn't even have firewalls. They only had their simple system, like virus and protection. But those are simple out-of-the-box protection. And so the reason and the main goal of this office, number one, is cybersecurity and protect our data from cyber threats. we're just hearing it about in the mainland, all these cyber ransomwares that are going on that's just hurting. In fact, several months ago, GovGuam and also UOG was attacked with a virus, and we were also caught it. But we have at Department of Finance, we have a double firewall, and so we were able to catch it on the second firewall and protect our data. This was a big push to make sure that we get everyone centralized. A lot of the positives that can happen is we have standard policy on security, standard policy on hardware and software, and that we can also centralize and instead of buying off the shelf software like Office or I want Excel, the new version. All of this we can maximize and have it where we already are working on an agreement for a centralized government agreement with Microsoft, and also for our security, as well as a lot of the hardware costs. I found signing documents and signing POs or bids and contracts where a department RFPs for 20 computers, and they get a computer, they get it at this rate. Let's just say a computer for $1,500. A month later, another RFP goes out for a different agency, same specs that I saw, but the price is different. And so that was kind of a big flag by saying, we need to get this together and centralized. Included in this centralization is to ensure that we have consolidated pricing and a full government pricing for all our internet, telephone, cell, as well as all communication, as well as hardware and software. So we're in that process. But at the time prior to this, any agency, department does their own thing. If they don't have their own IT and something happens with their computer, they call a vendor. And without even knowing that it's a simple, my line just needs to be plugged better. And they spend $80 just for a visit. And so those are things, help desk, just simple IT help desk needs. And so this allows us to make sure and ensure that we service all agencies for all their computing needs. And so that's what this office does. We're currently doing what we call a road show. We're visiting every agency and department and meeting them, introducing about the executive order. Again, they will also have a transition report before the 60 days up, is finding out what are some of the challenges and issues. And we did come across a couple agencies that are just hesitant with this centralization of IT. But the message is we're not doing a hostage takeover of your IT decision making and things like that. What we are doing is you're just gaining the support of a full office to support you in your IT needs. And so we've been going out and meeting different agencies. Likewise, in terms of the quarantine and customs, all systems and FTEs will move into this office. We're finding in our meetings with different agencies that are, whether they're federally funded and have specific IT needs, we're very sensitive to that. So we just make sure that, yes, you just need to follow the same IT policies that we're going to put in place. We have that policies in Department of Finance, but now we're extending it out to the whole executive branch and agencies and departments. And so that's the main goal of this centralization, is to minimize our IT cost and maximize on purchasing of our computing needs. And the most important is to secure our data. I can say that the Department of Finance, we are protecting ourselves from cyber threats. But I know as Secretary of Finance, if let's just use Department of Commerce gets hacked and their data is being held ransom, but they need that data, especially like our salary wage studies and things like that. Eventually it's going to come to me to pay for that or come up with a solution to get that resolved. And so I'm not waiting for something to happen. I'm making sure that we protect all our data. And especially with the new implementation of the financial management software, where every department will need to have good internet. And so these are issues that I found as I'm implementing this new software. They need good internet and a good system, and in some cases good scanners. Maybe not printing, but scanners, because we're going paperless. That's the whole goal of this. And if you have any questions or concerns, I'm ready to answer any questions.
Thank you, Secretary. I completely support the Office of Information Technology. As I stated earlier, I'm very excited for this centralization of just data management, security, upgrades, training, So at this time, I'd just like to see if the members or if Chairwoman has any questions in regards to the Office of Information Technology.
Just a handful. You talked about security, and that's all that, this whole IT office is being created for. And I agree with you. This is the 21st century we're in. I can't even apply, fill out an application online for BMV and stuff like that I used to be able to do when I was living abroad. So that's frustrating when I came back. Secondly, what you mentioned about security, what will happen to the JD Edwards information data, whatever we have there? How can it migrate, or has it migrated to this? And I'm sorry, I wasn't here when you did the presentation because I was off island for the legislature. So forgive my redundant questions. How has the migration into the new financial services management system been going on?
Thank you, Chairwoman Babauta. The financial management system implementation started in January. And so, which is exciting, but we're ensuring that all JD Edwards data is protected. And what we're doing is we're only implementing 2 years worth of data, last year's and the current year, in the new system. And the reason why is the goal was actually 5 years. Typical, you keep records 5 years. However, I'm sad to say, but a lot of our JD Edwards data is just it's not good data. Although this data is there, we just need to filter it out. And so in the interest of time and getting our financial management system, we're implementing last year's data and the current year's data, and we're projected to go live October 1st. And so on October 1st, we'll have 2 years of data in there, 2 fiscal years. The JD Edwards system is still going to be in operation for 2 more years because we have a software licensing agreement to make sure, and plus the server that runs the JD Edwards is also the server that handles our tax and rev system. And so I'm not there yet with the rev and tax system. And so I need this 2 years to ensure that data. So the JD Edwards data is still there. Our project managers on the CNMI side are working on a portal or a dashboard for the JD Edwards data, so that if you need information from 1997, what's in JD, we can still extract that data and get that data. So all the data is still being preserved. I'm just saying because I also changed our chart of accounts and change how some of the processes are in the financial system. It's very challenging to get the old data and translate it into the new system's new brain, so to speak, a new chart of accounts. And so to put in a lot of years' data is not going to allow me to go live by October 1, which is my goal.
Thank you. I have one other concern. I have received confirmation that the Division of Treasury has been burning documents, and you have said as much. I'm concerned. What are those documents that are being burned? Is there a procedure? Because I know in financial documents there has to be a procedure that is followed, and you can only burn, information that is not that is beyond 7 years. You're familiar with this, so please elaborate on that.
Thank you for asking. We have a lot of files. And so when I met my directors, we decided that we're going to make sure we have a lot of duplicate files. A lot of stuff at Treasury is also at Financial Services or
Yes.
Finance and Accounting. So they're duplications. We also have a lot of the carbon copy checks, check images, or the duplication. A lot of those are already canceled checks that are accessible in the Bank of Guam system and data. But going back to your saying, yes, there is a procedure. We did inform OPA that we were getting rid of some of this. We also ensured that all what they're going to destroy and burn, we needed to destroy and burn it. We couldn't just dump it, and it's so time consuming to do shredding. And so these are not original documents. These are all mainly duplications, documents at Treasury. And we're also going to go through the same process at some of the other divisions, customs. We have a lot of old data, 10 years, hard copy, but they're all in the JD system. And so we want to make sure that we're really fighting with space, and a lot of things are destroyed. We still have documents that are really wet and muddy from the typhoon, but we've never destroyed it, or it's still being held in Treasury. And so what we did was those also were being disposed properly. And so
we have your assurance that documents dating back 7 years till today are still intact.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, every year, just like even at Revenue Tax, after the tax year, the one that was 6 years, it's 5 years, but the 6 year gets moved to storage. They keep 5 years fresh, accessible data or actual documents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mangonia, did you?
Thank you, Chair. Secretary, just looking at the responsibilities of this new office, I'm looking at part of the responsibility number 6 or 14, and how we can support government agencies as well as citizens and businesses. As we know, WhatsApp seems to be a means of communicating with everyone, and whether these information can be verified or not. This is something that kind of brings uncertainty with people. Are there any plans, or will this system or office be able to disseminate, disseminate information or alerts to the masses, and whether it be, I don't know, Amber Alert, I don't know if this is something that you may have to deal with Homeland Security, or even any messages from the governor that affects the masses? Is this something that the system can provide, or is it something that which have to be looked at and requested to be included as part of this system?
The system I've been talking about is the financial management system, and it does have a lot of self-service data and also emails. So you can generate emails to inform if there's I can send an email, a blast of emails regarding, let's say, new policies or new regulations in terms of finance. There's a vendor self-service portal and also an employee self-service portal. So all government employees will have access to their records, their own personal records, and not anyone else, but their own. You can see your payroll stubs for the last, whatever we're gonna have for 2 years is our hope. At least going forward, every pay period, you'll have a copy of your, your payroll check, W-2s and things like that. But to answer your question in terms of like the Amber Alert, the office is responsible for that. They actually are working with Homeland Security, and they brought up issues and things like that already in their meeting. But like I said, where Homeland Security is tasked to do those, let's say if it's like an Amber emergency blast, we can certainly assist in making sure and help and making them be available to the public. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was just also a recommendation if it wasn't something that was already looked at. And so yeah, I just wanted to get more information on that. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Rep. Mangonia. Any other members have any questions for Secretary in regards to the second part of the EO? Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Secretary, for making time to be here today. Would you like to make any closing statements?
No, I'll just say thank you for having the opportunity to be in a setting like this, to share and to ensure, that, the intent of the executive order will be going out and ensuring, making sure no one is hurt in the process, but only to provide a better, efficient government and improve our processes. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for asking these questions, because areas that are of some concerns, we'll make sure that they're addressed or at least looked into. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary. And we will be communicating with you in writing just after this meeting. But at this time, you are excused. Thank you for making time to be here today and for having your team here with us too.
Thank you.
Okay, members, just moving on to the next part of our agenda is discussion. And at this time, I'd like to just open the floor for any discussion. I would like for our LA to prepare a letter to the Secretary of Finance and DLMR Secretary, just recapping today's meeting and requesting for the documentation that I'd like to see so that we can share that with our members. That is the organizational chart, the transition report upon completion, information on training and the academy. And if there are any other questions that the members have, please let us know so that we can include that in our letter. Yes.
Sure. So since we have about, what's today? About 18 days to decide what we want to do with this. Are we going to meet again to just offer our support, or we just leave it as is if it is something that the committee agrees to accept? What would you want to do?
Well, Rep. Selena is on her way back, but after today's dialogue, I'm comfortable with just communicating with a letter and ensuring proper transition. I don't think it would be appropriate at this time to challenge anything in this executive order. There's nothing, in my opinion, that has really stood out after today's discussion, especially after all the clarifying information that was shared. Unless any of the members have anything concerning.
Well, I mean, because it was maybe just for formality purposes. I don't know, maybe make a motion to adopt the executive order. If this is
Legal
something the
counsel?
committee would want, I can just request any sort of documents after that.
Yeah.
Like since it was referred to our committee.
I guess
What?
you can do it, but, you know, if you just let it run, it would comment. Or you can voice your, a positive note that you agree with it and you're adopting it.
I don't.
Either way.
That's the call of the chair. I mean, I don't know, it's, you can just
Why
close
just
this
don't?
chapter and then wait for any pending reports or revisit it. Should the report come out, let's say, and not be satisfactory.
I like to wait for Babalta before we make a decision, but I
But
don't.
in any case, I mean, I do support both portions of the executive order.
Yeah, and just like stated today, because they are in transition stages and very early on in the merger, there's really nothing specific that we can point out, other than to ensure the transition is smooth and appropriate. But legal counsel, is there a need to act on this piece of communication because it was referred to our committee, or can we just?
I guess it was for like informational purposes, right? And then it's up to the committee
Right.
to decide what they want to do with it. We can let it
So just at the next house session, we can just state.
Yeah, you can make a statement
Statement.
or you can just let it go and let the time lapse.
Yeah, I think just for, in the interest of time and work, that is the approach I'd like to take at the next house session, which will be next week. We will just go ahead and make a statement for the record.
Alright.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? We want to announce announcements? No announcements?
1
We do
o'clock.
have
Defense at 1 o'clock.
defense budget hearing at 1 p.m. Thank you all. That's in the next 50 minutes. So moving on, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
There's been a motion, discussion.
Ready.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Guys have it, we are adjourned. Thank you, committee members
Thank you, Chair.
and LB staff. Thank you so much.
Any announcement on?
Any announcement?
Later.
See you at 1. Thank you, Rep.
So, Madam Chair, in regards to the letter, like you were talking, you want us to mention the organizational chart to both of them, or just to because from what I recall, you only mentioned it to the DLNR secretary?